Patrick Rivera and Cooper Turley, and we are going to be talking about creator DAOs and the future of the intersection of crypto creator. So maybe I'll kick it over to you, Patrick, and Cooper. Maybe you can give us like take the 1 minute introduction. I know there's probably, you can go on for much more than that. So maybe Patrick, you want to start us off?
Yeah, definitely. I'm Patrick. I'm currently an engineer at a company called Mirror, and right now we're building tools to help creators and communities build entire businesses using crypto. And so today, our go-to-market strategy has been built around having these tools and running experiments with people. And so, for example, we have tokenized crowdfunding. We have revenue splits for sharing revenue from NFTs. We also added contracts for reserve auctions and additions. And so the past few months have been focused on experimenting and learning things. And now in the next few months is going to be around composing those tools into little recipes and creating like no-code interfaces so people can easily compose these tools together to build entire businesses where they're raising money, monetizing, governing, etc.
Nice. Yeah, I think we'll get some time to dig into some of that. And Cooper.
Nice. What's up, guys? Hey, I'm Cooper. For those who haven't met, currently building the creator economy at the bunch, about like 100 different crypto projects. Most importantly, projects like Audius, Friends with Benefits, working with RAC, doing some advisory for the Variant Fund. Huge fan and user of Mirror. I was on that from very early days, and it's been fantastic to watch just the project grow. I think it's a fantastic tool for creators, and everything that they're doing is right in line with sort of the next wave of on-chain cash flows and helping creators get paid. So I'm excited to be here and dive into some nuance about future of creator DAOs.
Nice. Yeah, thank you both. So I think the format today is we got about 30 more minutes for discussion, and then then we'll open it up the floor. We already have a bunch of questions that have come in even before before now, so we have some of those queued up, and then if we have any space, which we probably won't, but we'll try to even take some questions on the fly as well. But before we actually dig into, I think, some of the meaty topics around creator DAOs, I actually wanted to ask kind of one curveball question, because one thing that seems similar about the two of you, I'm sure everyone in the audience would agree, is like over the past, 6 months, the rise of Patrick and Cooper, at least on my Twitter feed, has been astronomical. I remember Patrick, you sent me a message, must have been like 5 months ago now, saying, hey, you're getting interested in this specific kind of angle on crypto and publishing, and now it's like, if I hear the word crypto and publishing, I'm pretty much guaranteed to see your name. So I'm just curious, like, if you can think back to the decision that you made, like, what's a decision that you made to really put yourself in the kind of the right stream? I think that's what so many of us probably in the audience are also thinking about, is how do you just kind of hooked into the right projects at the right times? So, I mean, no one's perfect, but maybe Patrick, what's a decision that you've made that was really the right one, and how are you thinking about making more of those kinds of decisions in the future?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It means a lot. Yeah, I'd say, for even some context, like the last 2 or 3 years, I've been writing, been tweeting. I would spend a bunch of time, like hours on the weekends, preparing Twitter on just different topics. And I was trying to figure out what's that thing that I want to focus on. It's like I can code, but I also really like business. I also like this creator stuff. And I was just kind of like in this exploration phase for a couple of years of just shipping content, doing stuff. And not like I'm realizing like follower count doesn't matter. And of course, it's beneficial for certain things, but what really matters, at least to me, it's like the people that I respect in the industry. Do they care about what I say? Do they respect me? That's really, at the end of the day, what matters the most. And I think for me, it's all around exploration, trying things. A lot of things didn't work during that time period. I was working at a DeFi startup called Dharma for a bit. That was a lot of fun on the technical side, but personally, I find myself getting super jazzed about just technical finance stuff. I want to think more about consumer, social apps, media, entertainment, education. And so a lot of it just goes down to just iterating, experimenting, pushing things out there, realizing you're not going to get success at first day, not necessarily worrying about like vanity metrics, like number of followers, and more so about what are the inputs, what's the quality of your thinking, quality of your research, the quality of your writing, etc., whatever product you're creating, just focusing on that and being honest with yourself about if you're doing something that you really aren't passionate about and you're not hungry to keep learning about on the weekends and your downtime, et cetera, then yeah, it's usually better to move on and try and find a new thing. And thankfully, I got really lucky in the sense that crypto/creators were starting to emerge, and yeah, and finally just kind of like found my niche and I'm just sticking to that at this point. But it was definitely a long, arduous process. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun though, and definitely worth.
Nice, yeah. So find your niche, and then make sure that the people who are, the leaders of that industry respect what you're doing, and you'll get pulled along. Is that kind of, that's how you summarize it?
Exactly. So yeah, there's ways to like optimize like the growth on social media or on newsletters, and yeah, I've tried that before. Oh, that sounds good. Seems like it worked for that person, but at the end of the day, it's like, hey, if it's not authentic, and B, really the most important thing is if you're doing great work, especially in crypto, creator economy, et cetera, it's small enough that people are going to notice after an amount of time. So just focus on the inputs as opposed to the outputs.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, let's dive into the meat of it here. So we wanted to talk about creator DAOs. So first, I mean, let's assume that not everyone here, or maybe no one really knows how to define a creator DAO anyways. So Patrick, oh, you're gone now. I guess he was scared off by even the thought of defining a creator DAO, which is totally understandable. Maybe let's see if we can get Patrick back up. Right. Well, let's see. While we're waiting for Patrick, do you want to take a stab at it? How would you define a creator DAO?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd also add on your previous question, I think writing is invaluable. For me, part of the reason that I was able to develop a following was just because I was writing so much. Obviously we have Patrick from Rivera here today, and I think that that's quickly turning into the most highly sought after blog to be publishing on. So for anyone in the audience that's looking to sort of take their standing to the next level, I would say first and foremost, double click on finding your niche and finding your voice, something that you're passionate about and that you can write about avidly and feel really comfortable with. And then being able to publish that somewhere where people can find it, sharing those insights, to the broader audience is kind of what I found to be successful. I think going to the creator DAO side of things, when I think of a creator DAO, I basically think of a community that's rallying around a more social cause. So whereas DeFi is centered around a financial protocol, I think for creators, it's mainly about communities. It's about different, brands or influencers or high profile figures that everyone's rallying around, and basically creating a system in which everyone can come together and contribute to the likeness of that project and be able to share an upside through some form of on-chain structure, in this case, like a DAO or like, a multi-sig wallet or governance or all these cool crypto tools that we're used to in Web3.
Yeah, Patrick, I'm not sure. Maybe I can ask you to, sort out something that's confusing in my head at least. So, what are non-creator DAOs? So maybe what makes this completely confusing is depending on what definition you use for creator. So let's say you take the Jesse Walton definition, which is maybe the most intuitive, but the most frustrating at the same time. So anyone who's creating value online is a creator. Isn't every DAO a creator DAO? Maybe can you just kind of help us unpack what's a creator DAO versus maybe a non-creator DAO?
Yeah. And if you'd ask 10 people, it'd probably be different answers. And it's always interesting to hear how people view it. For me, I like Lee Jin's definition of a creator, where it's someone that's creating content on the internet and not necessarily monetizing it, but just creating content. And so at least that's the framing that I have. And yeah, and I still think it's expansive. I like the creating value on the internet as well. And in that case, it's super broad. But yeah, I'd say that non-creator DAOs, I would even say, I take a lot of inspiration from DeFi protocols, and a lot of them, like 2 or 3 years ago, it sounded crazy to be like, oh man, you have these DeFi protocols, and yeah, at some point they're going to have governance, etc. They're going to have these treasuries, all theoretical. But now there's billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in these treasuries, and they're trying to figure out, okay, how much do we give back to the community versus reinvest in projects? How do we decide how decentralized should we be in product making, in decision making, etc. And so I think that's one sort of non-creator DAO that I think is really interesting to study. There's others that are more community based, where it's a FWB is not necessarily centered around a creator. The friends with benefits is may not known, but it's a group of creators. And I really like Cooper's example of saying that DAOs are like a social layer, like a social mechanism for people on the internet and ways to coordinate. And so, yeah, those are just a few things that came to mind.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. Like content creators is maybe a more useful distinction for us to use for now. So let's take that one. And I know, Patrick, you've looked at some content creator DAOs or groups. What have been some like aha moments where you really thought, okay, this is totally going to be the next big thing? What are the problems specifically for creators that you think these DAOs can solve?
Yeah, definitely. So I view DAOs as like an internet native organization. And so if you think about what are all the different layers of a traditional organization, and so there's legally incorporating, and so that's like a Delaware C Corp or an LLC or joint stock corporation that determines the rules of how the corporation is viewed by the government, et cetera. And then also you have a layer of like payment processing, and that's usually like Stripe. Then you have a layer around financing and raising money, whether it's loans, savings, or venture investment, et cetera. And then there's another layer around governance and how are decisions made. And usually that's done by a team, an executive team, maybe a board of directors, sometimes shareholders, et cetera. And so you think about that's in the traditional world. Within DAOs, see there's different components. There's for incorporation, you're not a Delaware C Corp run by legal contracts. You are just simply smart contracts deployed to the Ethereum network. And the benefit of that is basically create, and then other areas like payment processing, that's all out of the box through the Ethereum network. And it just happens automatically. You don't need to do anything for it. You just use it. And then also things around like raising money. You have tokenization, crowdfunding tools, et cetera. And then governance, that still needs a lot of improvement and ways to go, but there's already tons of amazing products that people are using. So that's kind of the way I think about like the DAO stack and how it's different from traditional companies. And what really excites me is that in the past, it was really hard to create like an economic entity, like this corporation. You have to get lawyers and to deal with taxes and accounting and all this complexity. And for the most part, it's just not worth it. And so I think there's a lot of value to be unlocked by making it easier for people to coordinate. And kind of one framing that I really like is that DAOs, by just deploying smart contracts and having preset configuration, you just click some buttons. DAOs enable any group chat to have a business model. And so you just think of there's how many group chats people have with maybe it's people that are really interested in a certain thing, like maybe it's research, maybe it's something around just crypto specific, maybe it's around some like arcane subject like to like Billie Eilish or something. It's not really arcane, but yeah, you can just see people that they associate each other based off of something, and they're really excited about it, and maybe they're creating content, maybe they're curating, maybe they're collecting. And right now, there's no great way for them to like create value from that or capture value from that, or like create these sort of like internet economies that Cooper's written about. And so the cool thing about DAOs is it's going to make it just as easy to create a group chat to create this economic entity on the internet at some point.
Yeah, and so this is, I wanted to kind of maybe push you on this question a little bit, because so sometimes what makes these confusing is that we talk about all of the things that a DAO can enable, being able to fundraise, being able to govern, et cetera. It starts kind of feeling like we're winding our way all the way back to just creating a business, right? So, and something you wrote a piece, I think, along with Brian Flynn and others, about DAOs, and you said like creative organizations begin to look more like flat peer-to-peer networks as opposed to hierarchies. But I think when you talk about now, like what you can enable with DAOs, won't some of them be very hierarchical? So I guess my question is like fundamentally, like what's crypto under the hood about all of this? I mean, what is like the technical innovation, and can you talk about like specifically what it enables? It sounds like based on what you were just saying that it's really like the ease of creation. So if you think about the ease of creating a smart contract as opposed to writing up a Delaware C Corp application or whatever, is that the primary difference, or can you just talk about a little bit like what's really under the hood, the difference between these two?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say that one of them is the transparency, where it's okay now, instead of just having this closed network based off these rigid structures, now you have these open, publicly verifiable smart contracts. And so that's one where now, and to your point around, okay, are we still going to create hierarchies and structures, et cetera? And I actually think, yes, we will. It's not just going to be these flat peer-to-peer networks. And I think there's like degrees of decentralization. And I think that this is something that Vitalik said at some point, is that crypto, it's not about not trusting anyone, just being fully decentralized and being decentralization maximus for everything. It's more about like solving problems and really trying to come up with the best solution for them. And crypto, what it enables is it has cryptographic and economic building blocks that allow you to decide who to trust, instead of basically dealing with some old world system that hasn't changed in many years and it's difficult to change. Right now with crypto, the building blocks, whether it's smart contracts, whether it's tokens, whether it's consensus mechanisms, governance, and then you compose those together into a DAO, whether it's DeFi protocols, these are all little primitives. And I think the thing about crypto is that now you can, at least the ideal version is that now you can be transparent, you can see exactly how things are working, how things, the logic of how things are being processed, et cetera. You're able to actually own the value that you're creating and the tokens, et cetera. And so I think it's about looking at the primitives and understanding that these are, the underlying structures are very different in how they're architected, and they allow us to just build these more transparent systems and experiment a lot more. And I think that's the big thing as well, is the amount of experimentation that I think we'll see. And so it's less about, okay, this is the perfect way to do things, and more about, okay, crypto gives us the tools to experiment many, many times, run many iterations and simulations on how governance should work, how DAO should work, how DeFi protocols should be structured, how protocol treasuries should be distributed. And that's what I'm most excited about, the rapid amount of experimentation that crypto enables.
Yeah, that's a great segue, I think. So let's maybe try to nose out of the weeds a little bit. And what are some of the experiments like that you are really like looking forward to? I know that one thing that's been really interesting about crypto is it really seems to move forward in one experiment at a time. So what are the ones that kind of you're looking for? I mean, you probably have some, under the behind the scenes that you're already working on. So without giving too much away, what are the kinds of experiments that you're really looking for next?
Yeah, definitely. I think a big one is around like community driven like investments. And so allowing a community to raise money, and from there, or say that you put money into a pool and you receive a token, and then the community decides, okay, what should we invest in? And not only that, but also how do you turn like this next generation of like social products, whether it's next version of Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, less into this system where you kind of need a ticket to get into their theme park, and then they decide all the rules of the theme park, and change it from that into more of this economy where you have this token, you have other people in the economy, and you're trying to help everybody else, and you all have shared ownership. And so the way that this could work in practice is say that, okay, you contribute to like ABC protocol economy, you receive a token in return, and then there's projects inside of the economy that want to get funded. It's very similar to these DeFi grant programs. And then the people in the community, they decide, okay, which project should be funded, how much should they receive, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's a way of tying back that value that's created from those projects back to people in the community. And so I think just this community-driven capital allocation and building these internet-native economies, that's at a high level. I'm happy to dive in deeper, but that's kind of the thing that I'm thinking a lot about is like, what would Y Combinator look like, where it's like everybody in the community can decide who should get investment, how much, and how does everybody have a stake in other people's projects and the value they're creating.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And just so I understand, in that kind of future world, let's say that I'm a creator, I'm a writer. Would you imagine that I'm basically participating in a number of different communities and basically accruing value in all those different communities, and then each of those communities is defining kind of its own protocols to actually kind of handle how those contributions happen? Is that essentially what you're talking about?
I could definitely see that. And one example I've seen, I think Cooper is probably one of the best examples of this, actually, someone who is working on multiple projects. I think the nature of work is definitely going to change, where instead of you have an employment contract with one company and you're working there for X number of years and they're paying a salary. Things going to change with these more fluid structures where it's like, okay, hey, I want to work on 3, 4, 5 different projects on my own time. I'm going to get paid not just in salary, but also get tokens based off of the value I'm creating, or just as an upfront and reward mechanism. And Cooper, yeah, has a ton of experience with this. I'm curious to get his thoughts on how he views the future of work, and that's kind of where I see it going. But I wonder from your experience of what works, what doesn't work.
I mean, I think being able to contribute to multiple projects in a fluid manner is the most exciting part about crypto. The fact that you don't have like a formally defined role or time allocation allows you to just kind of bounce around to things a lot more rapidly, which has been really helpful for me as someone that's interested by so much. I think, at the end of the day, to your earlier question, Joey, what crypto enables is more fluid ownership in these different projects. And so being able to have structures in place where I can come in, find a little pocket of a project that I'm really excited about, spend 5 to 10 hours a week and then be able to go on to the next thing after I'm done. I think that these structures are what's so exciting about crypto. And, with what we're seeing now with these sort of ownership structures, I saw yesterday there was this Dirt newsletter that's doing NFTs to represent, ownership over that outlet. And it's my understanding that token holders will not only get like equity in the project, but also have the ability to contribute in some way, shape, and form. And so I think for the creators of these publications, DAOs allow them to be a lot more active with who they involve and sort of get people to contribute in a meaningful way. So, I think it's both two-sided. One is the creator as one of these groups, making sure that you have a system for people to very easily come in and contribute, similar to Forefront and what we're all doing here. And then as someone from the outside looking to get involved, just being really active in their updates and sort of coming in and helping where you can, even if it's something very small. I think there's a lot of systems in place that allow you to be super hands-on with basically any project that you're passionate about. And I think that's a really promising future for us to develop more.
So where do teams fit into this? I think one pushback to the vision in which kind of we all creators are sampling from a lot of different projects and we're contributing to them, is that it's really hard to build high-performing teams. I mean, that's something that the business world, right, has been working on for many decades. And I guess, is it possible that a creator DAO, let's say, for example, is kind of the future version of a team, and this is like a group of people that are consistently working together, maybe they're consistently contributing to either one or multiple projects, or like how do teams play into this? Because that's the one part of the future that maybe sounds like it would be hard to replicate. Is that really kind of deep teamwork, especially for creators?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Patrick, if that's cool with you.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see this a lot at FWB. So we basically started out with about 7 or 8 core contributors who were coming together every week to do like staff calls, as we called them. But now we're starting to see the, subcommittees forming way more naturally, to the point where we now have like 3 or 4 different committees. All of those committees have a lead that's responsible for organizing that group. And then within that group, there's a number of, paid slots, it's a token allocation. But what I believe will happen is we'll start to see a lot more of these webs start to take form where there's different committees. Every committee has a head that's responsible for overseeing it. And then that committee will be, taking over a specific niche in a community where people can freely join and contribute. I'm really excited about tools like Coordinate, where basically a committee can have a fixed allocation of tokens that they can split pro rata relative to who contributes the most value. And I think to your question about teams, Joey, there's always going to be, a core, let's call it 3 to 10 people who are responsible for making sure that things are getting done in different committees. But from there, I think we're going to start to see more of this committee, subcommittee-like structure where there's groups around specific aspects of a project, one project lead, and then the ability for anyone to freely contribute to those committees as they see fit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. And I've been studying a lot of what FWB is doing. I think they're leading edge of a lot of this stuff. And so that's one of the first places I go to learn about how this stuff can look in practice. And at Mirror, something that I've been noticing is that in crypto, especially because it's so new and because it's so multidisciplinary, there are a lot of things that we would love to hire somebody on like a short-term basis, on like a project-like basis. So say that we're coming up with a new governance system for a token, or say that we are creating a specific type of smart contract that we want to optimize for gas efficiency or security. We want somebody to audit the contracts, or we want someone to advise on certain things. And there's there's a laundry list of things. What even it's like copywriting. Nobody on our team is like a master of copywriting, so we actually have somebody like part-time that we pay on a project basis to help us with that. And so I think because it's easier to incentivize people with tokens, and it's just like a function call in a smart contract and give them tokens or however structure you want, I think we're going to see a lot more of that, where you have the core team responsible for the vision, iterating the product market fit, coming up with the strategy, et cetera. But then there's also going to be these other people in the network that they're helping out on specific projects. They're getting like liquid compensation in the form of tokens or something else. And I think that's very, very interesting. And yeah, even for myself, it's like if I think of my time as 100% of my time, I'm probably gonna spend 80% of it on my main project, but I still have like 20% of the time that I want to spend writing and being part of cultives and hanging out in different communities. And so I also think that people are gonna have multiple identities, reputations, jobs, etc. And maybe in one of them they're a core contributor, but then in 3 or 4 they're more of like a passive participant.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like one of the unique abilities of tokens within a lot of this, is you have all this kind of swapping back and forth. And so it means that inevitably kind of your side projects and your main projects somehow need to meld together in a way that if your side project takes off, your main project also benefits. I think that's kind of like it is something that feels to me like crypto handles just a lot better than the kind of old world. But I'm curious, like, so as we don't have so much more time, but I wanted to get to, Patrick, especially you've been talking about these kind of transitions from different modes. So creator mode to org mode to protocol mode. And I think a lot of what we're talking about today, especially with DAOs and collaboration, it feels to me at least like, org mode to some extent. And you mentioned like one of the biggest transitions or the needs that we have to transition to org mode is getting more revenue on chain. Can you talk a little bit about like why that's so important, and what are like kind of the biggest obstacles to actually getting more of that?
Yeah, definitely. So for context, the way that Amir we're thinking about how to like our long-term strategy and how to iterate to a fully decentralized protocol is we think about it in 3 phases. And so the first phase we call creator mode. And in this phase, we're basically working with individual creators or very small groups of creators, like 1 to 3 of them at a time, forming a small collective and helping them run small experiments. And those funds go to their wallet. They don't have a token or anything. It's basically just revenue going directly to the wallet. And the benefit of that is that the coordination costs are lower. And so you don't have to talk to layers of middle management or get buy-in from a large group of people. You can just DM someone on Twitter or Telegram and set up an experiment and ship it in the next week. And so you can learn much quicker. And there's just a lot less surface area and complexity to deal with. And then now we're transitioning into more of org mode, which we see as in crypto speaking like DAO mode, and helping people form these organizations. And it's basically composing, take 1 or 2, or 1 to 10 or 1 to however many creators and helping them run an entire business. And there's benefits of bundling around stuff like you have shared distribution, you limit burnout because it's not solely reliant on you have a community, etc. And so that's where things are going. And so in org mode though, you can't just go to one person's wallet, because then you're going to need a lot of trust assumptions. And so instead it'll go to a multi-sig, and then it's useful to have a social token so that now multiple people can easily buy into the project and also be able to capture some of the value that's created as well. And so that just tends to have more surface area. And so that's the next phase after preparing the creator mode. And then ideally, if you spend time, that's going to take months, if not years, to really nail that. And then once you get to that point, what we could see is then you see these individual DAOs using the underlying tools of the protocol and other protocols as well. And then eventually you can see it becoming a protocol economy where you have like the master protocol token, maybe master not a good word, but just like the universal protocol token. And that's similar to how ETH is like the native protocol token for Ethereum. For DeFi protocols like Uni or Compound, etc. You have this native protocol token, and now the core team, they don't get outsized influence on product decisions. You build a developer ecosystem to build tools on top of the protocol, and that's definitely like the boss level phase of all of this, just because there's a lot more complexity. And at least at Mirror, our approach is we want to make sure that we have product market fit with the tools before we try and create this super complex, like decentralized economy. But that's kind of how we see like the long-term progression playing out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely makes. Maybe we could play out like a particular example even. I'm just kind of rewinding a little bit. You mentioned actually let's say we were going to set up a creator DAO and kind of try to bring revenue on chain. So maybe we could just walk through that to just so it's crystal clear. Because you mentioned some of the complexities would be setting up a multi-sig, et cetera. But I guess there's a lot more. So I have a group of a bundle of writers in those newsletters. So maybe that's a good example we can start with. So let's say that I wanted to transition, the Creative Kitchen, our bundle of newsletters into, totally, kind of crypto native, a DAO. What are the kind of key steps and where would things start to fall apart?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so the first step would be onboarding. And so right now we're working on, like, the V1 was you have a multi-sig, you have to integrate with Notes to Safe, but that tends to be pretty complex. And so we're trying to think of something similar to a lot of these enterprise software apps where you can just assign somebody a role, they have this role, they accept, and then, okay, they're onboarded. And so we're thinking about, okay, how do we do that through smart contract steps? And so that's first, you have your group, your squad, et cetera. You assign people roles. So for example, a mirror would be, okay, maybe you have write access, maybe you only have edit access, maybe you're allowed to write and use the economic tools, and eventually getting to that point. And so that's step one, onboarding, giving people roles. And then step two, I think, is the biggest constraint right now, and that's what you mentioned earlier around on-chain cash flow. And that's the thing. That's probably the area that's the meatiest and where new protocols can add the most value. It's creating on-chain cash flow. And by that, I basically mean products that people are selling on-chain. So right now, the number one, and the way we like to think about it is different business models. And so right now, the number one business model is selling a one-of-one NFT through a reserve auction. And so that's basically where you have like a reserve price or a minimum price. Once that's hit, it kicks off a timer. And then once it's done, then the highest bid receives the NFT. Right now, that's the primary business model. And it's great for many reasons, but for some reasons, it's not great because only one person is able to really, at the end, to win the NFT instead of many people. And so we think there's other business models emerging. I really like the idea of additions. So similar to NBA Top Shot, where they have collectibles at different tiers, like the gold tier, the silver tier, the bronze tier, and the gold tier is the most scarce. The silver tier is less scarce, and the bronze tier is the least scarce. And having different price points so people can participate, and then building social experiences off of that. I think that's going to be a pretty good business model. And then also stuff around, once L2 becomes more viable and it's cheaper to submit transactions on blockchain, then you can start creating more crypto native social experiences. And so now, instead of liking content, now you can maybe have a balance each month of $100 or however much, $100 worth of ETH. And then you use that balance every time you like something. You have like a default like, but then you can say super like, then it uses a certain amount. And you can basically embed value in different social experiences. I think that's going to be another business model. And so I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, is coming up with these crypto native business models that make sense. And basically, what's the crypto native version of a subscription? Instead of just renting out content, how do you either get ownership in the work or do something where it's, instead of just you pay once, how do you base it more on engagement of the content, or how much you like content that's produced that month? And then after that, after creating on-chain revenue, the last step will be around governance and deciding, okay, say that you have 10,000 a month going into your on-chain treasury for your creator DAO. Now, how does that get redistributed? And that's going to be really interesting as well. And we've seen with DeFi protocols, they have grant programs. And also we see with creator platforms like TikTok, Substack, Patreon, et cetera, all of them have creator funds. But with those, it's like $1 million, it's cash-based, and it's decided by executives at the company. But I think like crypto native creator funds, they're going to be just on-chain treasury, and people with tokens, whatever the voting mechanism is, they're going to decide how that creator fund is distributed. And also it's going to be equity. It's going to be a combination of equity and cash as well. And so I think that's going to be very interesting. So I think that's how I view the different steps, and the business model step is probably where it'll take the longest to really build out.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. And I guess I would just summarize it, and then we can move on. I think we actually have some audience questions that are very much kind of along those lines. But if I understand you correctly, and the assumption that I have going into this is, if you think about, creator collectives or creator DAOs that are actually collaborating to build content, that kind of almost by default has to be like a pretty high trust environment, because I mean you're creating content together, which is something that really takes kind of deep trust. So if you think about some of like the governance issues, or who has write access, who has publish access, it strikes me, I mean, those are important, and certainly for some collectives it'll be more important. Let's say the ones that are bigger, where there's maybe less just trust that isn't on chain. But the bigger, I mean, it seems like the bigger lift, and it sounds like you agree, would be to actually get the revenue, like get business on chain. So if you think about like the two sides of it, that's the part that probably feels just like there's the most room to go, and it's probably, at least for smaller collectives, the more critical kind of unlock to actually moving forward. Is that fair?
100%. Yeah, our MVP of, I don't know what you would really call it, I guess it's like, or give like permissions management. The MVP is basically everybody that onboards gets write access. Like, we're not spending time having different roles and all that. Eventually, like to your point, once you're in lower trust environments, but for now it's like we're going to operate under the assumption that if you're on the same multi-sig, or if you invite someone, then they're a good actor. And yeah, of course, it's not going to scale long term, but the main area we want to spend most of our time and energy is on building these new crypto native business models and ways for on-chain revenue to be created, because then that unlocks all the other cool stuff.
Totally. Well, yeah, thanks. I think we're gonna turn it over to some audience questions now, but thanks, Patrick. This has been amazing. I think I have a few that really tie into some of the things you were just mentioning. So one from Songcam, which I think is Matthew. Matthew, I mean, I can read it out loud, but if you want to jump on stage here and ask your question right to Patrick, please do. And Carlos, maybe you can help me make this magic happen. Matthew, are you there?
Matthew, yeah, he raised his hand.
Hello.
Matthew.
How's it going? You doxed me. I was trying to act like a DAO.
I know too much, I guess.
Yeah, my question was around exactly what you were recently talking about these sort of super likes and being able to unlock the value of engagement, and it actually providing value for the artists or creators. And I just was wondering, if you have some examples of like how that future, I don't know, just to like kind of color in what that future could look like on Mirror or otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. So for anyone that hasn't checked out SongCamp, they're awesome. Matthew's one of the people that's also constantly learning things, getting involved at the bleeding edge of this stuff. So definitely check them out if you haven't already. In terms of the engagement piece, and so first I think it's important to understand why it's important. And so like right now, when you do a subscription, you're basically paying upfront, and you pay $10, whether it's someone is shipping content you like or don't like. You could cancel the subscription, but that's kind of a hassle, and you have to resubscribe again. And so the simplest thing is usually just to pay for the subscription and do it. And again, so one is, you're not really tying the value created with the value that you get from it. And then also that it can't be spent in other places. And so you're kind of tied to just a few people that you're subscribing to. And so what I think would be kind of the next version is, instead of paying $100 a month across like 10 people on Substack for $10 a month, I could see people having, like, again, this is more practical on L2 or somewhere where transaction fees are lower. But it would be like you top up your wallet balance for the specific platform and your specific protocol, and you have $100 in there. And then now for likes, you can have, instead of liking content or maybe even like bookmarks or whatever the interaction model is, you can say, okay, I'm going to use up 10 of my 100. I'm going to use 5. We're going to use 15, 20, etc. And so now instead of only spending $10 a month for 10 people, now you're able to distribute that for different people on the platform. So that's one way to do it. And I'm sure there's reasons not to do that. The people that have audiences, they may not like it, but people that are more passive creators, they may enjoy it. And so I think there's a lot to try there. But I think that this at least allows us to kind of use the engagement activity as a better marker of value capture and creation. And I think the other one that's really interesting is around staking. And so this would be where, say that you have 100, and then at the beginning of the week, this would kind of gamify. And I think it's probably a little crazy, but I think someone will probably build it. Where say that you have $100 to spend each week, and then you basically vote at the beginning of the week of who you think is going to be the most popular that week. And you say, okay, maybe let's split it 50 between Matthew, 50 between Joey, or do 10, 10, and 10 for different people. And then you basically have some sort of metric that's independently verifiable. Maybe it's number of people who've read it, maybe people that engage it. And of course, you need to make sure that it's not a gameable metric. Let's say you find a good metric that people can trust and they believe in. And at the end of the week, basically the top 10 people for that metric, they split the pot, or however you want to do it. Maybe the top person gets all of it or something like that. And so you make this more of like this gamified experience, and it's fun. You get to bet on people. And of course, there's also like the mental health stuff where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not voted as high, and there's going to need to be controls in place. But I think those are just like crypto native business models that, they're going to kind of change the way social apps are built and value is created and captured.
Really interesting. Especially that second one, I haven't heard that sort of idea. That's really, really cool idea. Crazy, but crazy that you want to build it.
Yeah, exactly. I see Sean, his name is Sean McManus, and he used to work at Pinterest. I could see something at Pinterest that's like, okay, maybe you curate collections of the best pins, and you basically, then people vote on that, and there just needs to be, but right now it's like, okay, the top 1% of creators on platform, they make a living, but how do you help the people that are curating? How do you help get the long tail creators? And subscriptions is one way, but I also think these social based ways of engaging and monetizing, there's just endless possibility there.
Awesome. Thanks for taking my question. Thanks for having me up here.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm wondering, is Miguel in the audience? I think he had a question that you briefly touched on, and I also have on my mind. Miguel, are you there? Otherwise, I'll read it out loud. Maybe you listen to the recording. So Miguel's question was, when onboarding new normie users into Web3 apps, do you think we should try to hide all the crypto behind the UX to the point where they don't need to know what they're using is powered by crypto? Is it better to take the time to educate them in the space, even when it means increasing friction for the product? I think a question I also have, maybe you can answer at the same time, is like, how long before, let's say, creator DAOs are using these tools without actually knowing what's going on under the hood?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a really core question, and deep people. It's something that's kind of hard to go back on. And say that. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing. And so the two options, one is, okay, people may not know how to download MetaMask and onboard with ETH, et cetera. And so one route we could go is we could have email and password login. We could have fiat on-ramps where you can just sign up with a credit card. And then under the hood, it's stored on Ethereum network somehow, or most likely it's like the protocol itself. They also have access to your fund, or maybe it's a multi-sig and they don't get full access, but yeah, and so you kind of make certain compromises in order to improve the experience. And at least now today, the products that have done the best in the consumer side, they seem to go that route, whether it's NBA Top Shot, whether it's So Rare, Bitski's getting pretty popular. I think these, in the short term, I do think that if you're optimizing for that, that's the route to go. But then I also think that crypto is growing enough where there's like a small niche community of people that are willing to learn the tools. And I think that the big challenge is, for example, Foundation, they started off by onboarding with like email and password and credit card. But what they saw was that it just added a whole host of complications down the line, and it wasn't as composable as they wanted to be. And just the tooling couldn't evolve to the level they wanted to. And so they took a step back and then recreated a crypto native, used MetaMask, et cetera. What they're realizing is that the challenge is, if you build something that people want enough and it's valuable enough, that people will be desperate to figure out how it works. And of course, you need affordances in the product. They're one of the beautifully well-designed products. You still need that component. It's not just, okay, build something that people want and then they're just going to figure everything out on their own. So I think that's kind of the philosophy we have at Mira, where it's, okay, we don't want to compromise on like the medium term or long term product vision. And there's probably a way to migrate it over, but we think that building like this from the start allows us to be unconstrained in our creativity. And so the challenge now is, okay, how do we do two things? One, how do we make the product valuable enough that people are banging down our doors, ready to figure out how it works? And I'm constantly, every week I have 2 or 3 calls with creators, onboarding them on the platform or fixing bugs that they're running into. And so that's just like something that we have to be willing to do. And then also, just having affordances in the product that makes it easier to use, even if it is crypto native. And so that's kind of the philosophy we have. And who knows long-term though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Mirror, because I thought this was a particularly good point to immediately with. Because so I'm just curious. I mean, when I'm on Mirror, I'm very aware of the crypto nature of it at all times. I mean, you're going to see a couple, Ethereum wallet addresses, no doubt, on every post, and there's kind of all these things that are very uniquely crypto. So, I mean, is that the balance that is that kind of making sure that you're not sacrificing the medium to long term? Or have you thought about basically, could you like make it so that it wouldn't be as kind of obviously crypto to people who are just discovering it for the first time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so for us I think there's like 2 layers. One is like on the back end, like logic layer, like where's data stored, who has administrative privileges over the protocol, and that so you can go full crypto or you can go partially crypto. And but it seems like your question is more focused on the interface side and displaying things there. And I think for us, like we've gone back and forth around, okay, should things be priced in ETH or should they be priced in USD? Should we allow people to pay for things in stable coins like USDC or DAI, or only ETH? And again, we think that ETH is, since it's the native token, you need it for any protocol, and it just simplifies the experience. You don't have to like get this other token. And so for us, it's like we make compromises in the sense that, okay, we want you to connect with Twitter, so it's not just this random address. We want to do things, so we're willing to make compromises there. But we also feel like, for in other areas as well, it's kind of like we want to teach people and educate them. So it's a constant push and pull. We want things to be intuitive, but we also want to educate people as well, because we think that medium long term, that's the best solution. Like, for example, using ETH to pay for things.
Yeah. So hi guys, I'm Sister Abhishek from. I've been working in this space with NFT to understand a few things, and we're primarily working with media asset as NFTs, working on that. So I wanted to understand your views, Patrick, especially yours, building Mirror, with the kind of revenue streams that you see with creator DAOs. So we understand that creators need to create a DAOs, might have a constant pressure to create, but they have the ability to also serve protocol DAOs, collector DAOs, curator DAOs, and some of the other types of DAOs that exist in the space. And I wanted to understand your views on what might be additional revenue streams, apart from just creating content in this case. And
yeah, definitely. And so the question is, other revenue streams for creators, on-chain revenue streams other than just creating content to monetizing that directly. And so I think one cool thing is that DeFi is just blowing up. It's constantly changing, improving, etc. And so I think that creators are going to be able to, if they have this creator DAO, they can basically take their funds and then invest it. And of course, there's like risk reward, etc. And so it's not just like free money. But I think that's going to be an interesting way where they can pool together their capital, and maybe they're just buying it or buying tokens and holding them, or maybe they're flipping them, or who knows. And so I think that's one way. Is there's going to be these crypto native investment strategies. That's one. What Cooper talked about earlier, where there's like these loose networks, or maybe we even have Mirror. I mentioned earlier how we have a copywriting expert that we basically bring in whenever we're writing something or we have something for the website. And so I think something like that's like another revenue stream as well. And so I think like this ghost writing makes it very easy to be able to get to monetize through that thing. And you mentioned curator DAOs, and I mentioned it a few times as well. So through curation, and so I think that's a big one. Another one is like investing in creators. So Mr. Beast, he's starting something called Juiced, where they basically look at different YouTube accounts, look at their analytics and invest in them. And so I think creators investing in other creators, that's going to be very interesting in crypto. And And so it could be like, okay, I'm going to give you $5,000 a month for you to go full time, and then I'm gonna let you leverage my distribution, my audience to share some of your content, and you do that. I think another big one is cohort-based courses. That's really interesting, and a lot of people are looking at that, and you don't necessarily need crypto for that. Maybe in the future you use tokens and NFTs to be able to kind of gamify the educational experience. And so, yeah, I think those are just a few.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I just wanted to continue or ask a follow-up. So do you see the use of creator DAOs managing their treasury well and utilizing DeFi protocols to offset their risk from actual creation, and maybe then move on to repurposing or co-creating content?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so you have teachers unions and stuff like that where, yeah, they I'm actually not sure I should study how exactly they're structured, but from my understanding, it's like you have benefits and you have certain people that are negotiating for your rights, etc., and you get benefits like insurance, health insurance, etc. So I could see some on-chain structures being built where you have like this form of collective bargaining. We have these creators, they band together, and so instead of one creator investing, say, $10,000 into some investment protocol, now you have hundreds of creators collectively bargaining for better rates and also lower gas fees and stuff like that. And so now you guys a whole different protocol that like DeFi protocols are probably going to compete for them, give them different rewards and discounts just because they're like very powerful and they have a lot of people and like capital that they're willing to deploy. And so I think that the cool thing about DAOs and smart contracts and governance is that now there's more fluid structures for anyone to create their own sort of union on the internet.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. That helps a lot. Thanks, Joey, Patrick, and Carlos, and the Forefront team hosting.
Thank you. I think actually, let's wrap it there. I would say the other way to participate in creator DAOs that isn't just creating content is also editing, curating, producing, and etc. And that is my shameless plug for Forefront. And I think hopefully everyone has gotten a chance to check out the different programs that we put out there. So the writers program, where we not only have writers if you're interested, also editors, and there's a whole bunch of other ways. So check out the Forefront if you want to kind of join in. We'll be running these chats every week, as well as putting out the incredible newsletter thanks to Carlos every Monday morning. And yeah, thanks again, Patrick, for the time. It was super fun, and we'll see you around.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me.